You know when you have a really spicy taco, and as much as you're enjoying it at the time, deep in the back of your mind is the horrifying realization that sooner or later you're going to have to go through the nightmare of shitting the thing out? Well, that's kind of how I feel about the Resident Evil movies. And like that proverbial post-taco dump, the best thing to do is clench hard and get it all out. Ready? Good. Grab your toilet paper because there's going to be a lot of shit in this one. Movie adaptations of popular video games aren't exactly known for being high-quality works of art that sympathetically convert their source material into a new medium. There's been plenty of cinematic duds over the years, but Christ, the Resident Evil movies really took the concept of lazy, inept, cash grab nonsense to the next level. Written, directed and produced by Paul W.S. Anderson, not to be confused with Paul Thomas Anderson, who's actually a really good director, and coincidentally starring his real-life partner Milla Jovovich, the series is loosely based on the video games of the same name. What do I mean by loosely based on? Well, generally it means following the adventures of Anderson and Jovovich's object of mutual masturbation, Alice, an implacable, super powerful Mary Sue with no personality or memory of her former life, but a very unique set of skills that allow her to pretty much do anything the plot needs her to do. Wow, these movies were really ahead of their time, weren't they? Anyway, the studio managed to produce 6 of these turds before the series finally sputtered to a halt a couple of years ago. In each one, Alice lurches through a series of poorly constructed action sequences and laughable CGI monsters, strung together by paper-thin excuses for plots, peppered with actual characters and dialogue from the games that have been stripped of all context and played by actors who look like they have no idea why they're there or what they're supposed to be doing. That probably explains why they usually screw up whatever they're doing and need to be rescued by Alice. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about where this all began. So in the late 1990s, the Resident Evil games had really taken off and become massive worldwide hits, and Capcom, like any money-hungry corporation, decided to cash in on the success by launching a movie adaptation. Fair enough, Resident Evil was based around cheesy low-budget horror flicks in the first place, so turning it into a movie would be like bringing the creative enterprise full circle. It should have been easy. Haunted house, zombies, traps, secret experiments, corporate conspiracies, final showdown and escape before the place self-destructs. Bish bash bosh, you're done. Go collect your paycheck. But of course that would make too much sense. So the rights to a movie adaptation of Resident Evil were bought by Constantine Films way back in 1997. The company went through a series of scriptwriters, including zombie master George Romero, who all produced screenplays that closely followed the events of the first game, but each of them was rejected in turn because, why would you want to stay faithful to your source material? Then Paul W.S. Anderson came to their attention. Anderson had written and directed a successful movie adaptation of Mortal Kombat a couple of years earlier, and the cult sci-fi horror movie Event Horizon. So here was a guy who could do both horror and video game adaptations, 2 for the price of 1. When they found out he'd already written a script that he openly described as a shameless rip-off of Resident Evil, well, it was a no-brainer, and that pretty much sums up the tone of this series, to be honest. So the plot of Resident Evil centres around Alice. She wakes up naked in a shower with no memory of how she got there or even who she is. Hey, we've all been there, okay? Anyway, the upshot here is that Alice is basically a blank slate with no flaws or internal motivation of her own. An avatar, if you will. I guess viewers are supposed to project themselves onto her, just like in video games? Maybe I'm being a bit too generous in my analysis here. Writing characters is easy when you don't have to give them any backstory or personality, eh, Paul? Before Alice can learn more about her situation, she's captured by a shady special forces team that burst into her deserted mansion house. And it's here that we're introduced to the supporting characters we're going to be spending the rest of the movie with. There's authoritative commander guy, geeky computer guy, a bunch of extras that aren't going to make it through the first 30 minutes, and Michelle Rodriguez. Authoritative commander guy explains that Alice is an employee of Umbrella, a medical company engaged in all kinds of naughty genetic research in the Hive, which is an underground research lab beneath the mansion she lives in. An unexplained accident has caused the Hive security system, the Red Queen, to seal the Hive up and lock down the whole facility. The lockdown triggered the release of a gas in the mansion that caused Alice to pass out and lose her memory. Wait, what the fuck? The team's mission is to get into the Hive, interrogate the Red Queen to figure out what exactly happened, find any survivors and escape before the blast doors seal them inside permanently. Because, they were just kind of playfully locked down before, but in a couple of hours they'll really close. God's sake. So the gang boards an underground train that takes them into the Hive, where it looks like bad things have happened. Everyone's dead and all the doors are locked. They push on to the Red Queen's chamber, where they lose a few extras to a ridiculous laser defense system that picks them off one by one, before turning authoritative commander guy into mince cubes. Yeah, you could probably lead with that in future, Red Queen. Do automated defense systems normally enjoy torturing people like this? Why is the system even attacking them anyway? Like, they work for the same company, shouldn't it be able to recognise who they are and why they're there? And why do they have to physically go there to speak to the Red Queen anyway? Can't they communicate remotely? Like, send her an email or something? So anyway, they get to the Red Queen, who's a creepy looking hologram of a little girl for some reason, and after ignoring her warnings to leave, geeky computer guy shuts her down with a big power surge thing. This releases all the door locks and allows the zombified former employees to escape, which soon results in a laughable gunfight where more people die, and then the movie hard cuts to another scene. Like, I'm not even kidding, they're surrounded and fighting for their lives, and then in the blink of an eye they're free and clear, and they've moved to an entirely different part of the facility. I love how we're barely 30 minutes in and already this movie's ventured into zero fucks given territory. So you can probably guess where this is leading. Alice and her band of merry men, and Michelle Rodriguez, have to fight their way past the zombie hordes, avoid the mutated monsters that have gotten loose, and find a way to escape the hive before the time runs out and they're sealed inside for good. Forget the slow, tense, ominous atmosphere of the Resident Evil games. This is a desperate race against time escape story. The clock's ticking, boys and girls, go go go! Along the way, Michelle Rodriguez gets bitten and infected with the virus, but Alice conveniently remembers there's a cure, so she sets off to get it. One of the group who's been acting shifty the whole time turns out to be a traitor, but he gets his comeuppance at the hands of an amazing CGI monster. The team gets trapped in a room, but the Red Queen demands that they kill their infected friend to prevent the virus from spreading, only for geeky computer guy to come in and save the day at the last moment. They board the escape train, have one last showdown with an escaped monster that finishes off the supporting characters, leaving just the two leads to be captured by the evil Umbrella Corporation and of course to set up some sequel bait. It's difficult for me to properly convey how bad this movie really is, from the lame sets to the cheap gun battles, the Matrix style slow-mo fights, remember when that was cool? The indifferent soundtrack that's often completely at odds with what is actually going on, the shoddy acting or the complete lack of any characters from the game. Let's start with the actors here. Milla Jovovich isn't what I consider an actress of great dramatic range. She looks good I suppose, but honestly she has like two facial expressions in this entire movie. Downturned face with a slightly angry glare, and mildly surprised / confused. I love in this scene how she's just witnessed a dead body floating inside a sealed lab and 2 seconds later she totally doesn't give a shit. Neither does James Purefoy, who's got this weirdly blank indifferent look on his face, like he knows he's better than this film and he regrets signing on for it. Oh, someone's agent's getting fired after this. Michelle Rodriguez just looks kinda drunk and pissed off for most of the movie, which is funny because that's pretty much exactly how I felt when I was watching it. Shit man, that's how I feel now. The action scenes that this movie seems to rely on so heavily are beneath contempt. They're stale, flat and slow paced. Shooting, shouting, more shooting, zombies fall down and get back up, more shooting. Zombies also seem surprisingly good at sneaking up on people when it's convenient for the plot. They're certainly not helped by some appalling CGI that was laughable even by early 2000s standards. I mean, take a look at this guy right here, and let's not even mention the liquor at the end. The sets here look exactly like what they are, wooden and unconvincing sound stages, and they're all shot in this weird close angle style that reminds me more of a low budget TV show trying to cover up for the fact that its sets really aren't very big. The Hive is meant to be this sprawling underground complex, but it feels more like a small clutter of labs and offices. Oh, and the obligatory sewer level, because, you know, why not, right? The problem here is that there's very little to connect me to the game this film's supposed to be based on. I mean, the Umbrella Corporation is mentioned occasionally, and yeah, I suppose they're an underground lab, but that's pretty much it. None of the characters from the game appear at all. There's no spooky old mansion house to explore, no mysteries to be solved, no gradual revelation of what actually happened there. The game was tense and unnerving because you were up against the unknown. There was no immediate explanation for why there were walking corpses roaming the mansion trying to eat your face. No answers to your questions. You had to gradually piece it together from little clues and hints scattered around. But here it's all just thrown at you in the first few minutes. Lab, viral outbreak, everyone's dead, move on. And it's not like Resident Evil's a particularly challenging video game to adapt into a movie in the first place. With other titles, you could really see the struggle they must have had to try and craft a cinematic storyline around material that was just fundamentally not compatible. But Resident Evil had a pretty movie-like storyline to begin with. It was even split into 3 distinct acts. The initial arrival in the mansion and first contact with the enemy, the exploration of the environment and gradual understanding of the situation, and the final climactic showdown. Yeah, it wasn't terribly original, but it worked a hell of a lot better than the movie. Overall, Resident Evil feels like a cheap, soulless corporate cash grab, made by people with little or no understanding of the game and played out by actors who either didn't deserve to be there or didn't want to be there. Fans of the game won't find enough of what they like to connect with it, and general audiences are likely to be turned away by the cheap effects and lame action. But I guess someone must have watched it because God help me, they made 5 more of these fucking things.
You're all going to die down here.